here's Brody Brazil.
I want to give full credit where it's due. I was recently watching a David Sampson video, and the title and thumbnail asked a pretty simple question. Should Major League Baseball consider building smaller stadiums moving forward, or taking some of its bigger ballparks and making them smaller to fix the attendance problem? And all the photos of empty seats that we've already seen this season, it does feel like we're seeing more of that now than ever before in years past. However, baseball told us that last year they had one of their best attendance seasons in recent history. So it all kind of doesn't add up. It all doesn't make sense. By the way, the photo you're looking at here is of Baltimore's Camden Yards. This was a game a handful of years ago, which was intentionally played with no fans. They had a conflict in the city of Baltimore, and they decided it was easier to pull off this game in this series with nobody in attendance. This was not a COVID game, but the point is here, that's how empty an intentionally empty stadium looks. But if you kind of transpose that on some actual full-scale real-life baseball games, like this was just a few days ago, April 16th at PNC Park in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Clothing Company snapped this photo. I think it's mid-game, mid to late game, but oh my goodness, that's a beautiful ballpark. That's a team that has one of baseball's best pitchers. And I understand all the conflict, and I understand all the front office and ownership and fan tension that exists right now, and that's probably part of it. Maybe weather is part of that. We'll explore all the reasons why. But yes, seeing these photos is kind of stunning. A couple days before that, this is Target Field. The Minnesota Twins at first pitch. That's what their crowd looked like. Was it too cold? Was there something else going on? Is it a school night? It is April 14th, but you can clearly see at another great ballpark, not a lot of fans. Now let's go to the minor league circuit. Well, actually Major League Baseball, but at a minor league ballpark. The Sacramento A's in West Sacramento, California. I still believe to this point, as I'm recording this, I don't believe they have officially had a full sellout. Maybe on opening night, but that was 13,000. I know the ballpark seats about 14,000. That's also announced attendance versus paid attendance versus actual attendance. I mean, you can see for yourself. That's the thing about actual paid and announced attendance, is that they're all different things, but the visuals and actual attendance probably tell the most accurate story here. And then in Miami, for the Marlins, this was on April 16th. Tonight's paid attendance per the Marlins, 8,438. Now, we can't see the entire ballpark, but if those are the best seats, I don't think there's 8,400 fans in attendance for that game on April 16th. And it does look like we're later in the game, if I can glance at the scoreboard there. So some points to be made here that there might have been more fans, but all of these are pretty outstanding photos, and they do tell a story that so far this year, there have been multiple teams, multiple stadiums with very low attended games. Now, I told you about that report from baseball. This was at the end of last season. MLB came out to say they had their highest game attendance. 71.3 million fans across North America went to see MLB games. That was the most since the 2017 season. So it has been more, but it also has been a while since it's been 71.3 million. It was also the first back-to-back attendance gain years in a dozen years, meaning 2 years in a row where they've had, significant gains, and it's been a while since baseball has actually been growing like that. But all that established, are we regressing right now? I do remember photos early last season of some empty ballparks, but how could it be that baseball is gaining, but so many ballparks are empty on so many occasions here early in the season? So the overall question of this video, and kind of the inspiration by David Sampson's video, is there any benefit to Major League Baseball actually downsizing its current venues and making the capacities smaller? Either you build a new stadium when you eventually do, and maybe the capacity's 28,000, 31,000. Or do you take some existing stadiums like the Cleveland Guardians did at Progressive Field, shave off 10,000 seats, and all of a sudden you go from 45 to, I think they're at 34,000. We'll see them on here in just a second. Is that an actual consideration to get away from the optics of an empty stadium and to maybe make the tickets a little bit more in demand? Let's have a glance here at the overall capacities of big league stadiums in 2025. And this is a bit skewed. I do want to warn you, the purple area that's in 20%, that's less than 38,000. But you do have to remember, two stadiums this year are the Rays' Steinbrenner Field. It's actually the Yankees' Steinbrenner Field that the Rays are borrowing. That seats a little over 10. And the same thing with Sutter Health Field Park, I always forget. In Sacramento, it's also 10,000 seats, 14,000 total capacity. So those two exist as part of that purple. That's why it's now up to 20%. It should be more like 12% or so. Over 50K, only one stadium. That's Dodger Stadium. That represents in blue the 3%. 17% are from 45 to 50K. So those are big stadiums, right, for Major League Baseball. Almost half the league fit in the 40 to 45,000 seat capacity. That makes a lot of sense. Another 13% are in that 38 to 40 range. We'll go through those in just a second. So now you get an idea of the total capacities. It is kind of a small window, but there's barely anybody above 50. Well, just one team, and below 38, there's obviously a few more. We get to MLB's biggest venues. Dodger Stadium, 56,000. Home of the Diamondbacks, Chase Field, 48,330. T-Mobile up in Seattle, almost 48. Coors Field in Denver, almost 47. Same thing with Yankee Stadium and Angel Stadium. And if you look at the ages of these stadiums, Dodger Stadium and Angel Stadium are the only old ones. Everything else here has been built within the last 25, maybe 30 years total. So you can see that big stadiums versus age, they're either old or they came from this era when baseball was kind of booming. In the early 2000s, hey, we need to build ballparks that seat 45 to 50,000, and this is kind of what they used to do. Now, in terms of last year's percentage of attendance, right, what I'm going to put on the screen here right now are the percent of attendance in capacity from last season. So Dodger Stadium, it's a big stadium, and they sold it out to the tune of 84% last year. That's impressive, but obviously they were a team that went on to win the World Series. Very good and attractive team. Chase Field, 58% of capacity last year. T-Mobile Park, 62. That's a little bit better. Coors Field, 57. Yankee Stadium, 87. Angel Stadium, 67. So my point in all of this is some big stadiums do have a need. Like if you can fill big stadiums to the tune of 87 and even close to 70%, that's great. But if you're down here at 57% and 58%, that means like cut 48 in half, right? So let's round it up to 50, cut it in half, 25. So for every game that there is 25,000, or every game that there's 48,000, let's start there. For every game that there's 48,000, there's a game with like 12 or 13,000. You see the math here, right? To get to these numbers, if they ever fill it up, that means there's a lot of games where it's also very empty. So some big ballparks actually use and need their capacity. On the flip side, here are the smallest big league venues. PNC Park in Pittsburgh, 38.7. Target Field, 38.5. Kauffman, almost 38. Fenway from a totally different era, the early 1900s, 37.7, and they've obviously added as time's gone on. Lone Depot Park, less than 37, and Progressive, again, they've shaved off some seats there, now down to below 35,000. And the age range here is really only Fenway as the oldest, Kauffman from 50 years ago, close to 60 years ago, I think. Everything else is relatively new. These are more modern ballparks within the last, let's say, turn of the century. So age and size, you can see that there have also been some small ballparks here in addition to some of the oldest. But how are these filled last year? Well, Pirates fans, not really happy these days. Bad team, rough relationship with ownership, 53% last year. So again, every time that there was a sellout, that means there was a game with probably less than 10,000 fans. And we've already seen more than a handful of times this year the Pirates announcing, not actual attendance, but announcing attendances of less than 10,000. Target Field last year, 55%. Kauffman, 49%. And I think that was a pretty good Royals team last year. Fenway's Fenway. Obviously, that kind of stands out and sticks out. The Marlins at 34% of 36,000 filled seats. And then Cleveland at 68% for 34,000. They had a good team last year, obviously. So smaller venues doesn't necessarily mean that these numbers go up, right? In fact, the bigger venues needed all those seats and actually used some of that capacity versus some of these smaller venues, which are not even maximizing having fewer seats and having bigger crowds. So let's get to some considerations here. I normally do takeaways, but this video is going to have considerations, things to think about. What creates the extreme emptiness that we've seen in some of those first few photos recently. Number one, I realize this is April. There's bad weather. There's cold weather. It has snowed at some Rockies games this year. Did one get snowed out the other day? Bad weather is obvious. Nobody wants to sit outside for 3.5 hours maybe and watch a baseball game in the snow. I get that. I should have also added in here the school year. That's part of it too. You're playing a Tuesday night game. Totally comprehensible that maybe you're not going to take the family, or you're going to save it for a weekend, or you're going to save it for June when everybody's out of school. Totally get that. Bad weather and time of year. But another thing that creates extreme emptiness, like in Pittsburgh right now, bad team, like really bad record, or bad ownership, as in, why can't the Pirates keep their good players or add any new players? There's no urgency to try and become a better baseball team. Fans respond to that by, well, not showing up to games. Do you notice it's places like Pittsburgh and Miami that were featured there prominently? And in Minnesota, the team's up for sale, and I can't speak to that situation as much, but clearly in Miami and clearly in Pittsburgh, fans are upset. How about overpriced tickets? Maybe that's a reason why they're not showing up. And yet, doubleheaders, sometimes photos are taken at the back end of a doubleheader, and you can understand why attendance is what it is. That's one consideration. Here's another consideration. You see this in baseball more than any other sport because baseball teams have the biggest stadiums, not as big as football, but they have a high volume of games. 81 home dates with stadiums of 40 and 50,000. It's hard to get that many fans. And that's why the NHL and the NBA and obviously NFL has just 8, 9 total home dates. And that's why you can get a crowd of 70,000. They make the supply so short that the demand is so great. And baseball kind of has that supply and demand problem. The supply is so great and the demand is so small, and that's why we're seeing a lot of photos like we've seen. But lowering capacity, right? Like if you are a team that wants to have a high attendance by the end of the year, you want to capitalize on 4th of July weekend or that series in August against your rival where you're going to sell out all 3 games or all 4 games. The problem is if you only have a capacity of like 33,000 and you're trying to get, 2.7 million fans that year, if you can't sell out games to the tune of 45 and 50,000, what happens on the inevitable nights where you're only going to get 13,000? If you lower capacity, you cannot capitalize on those peak games and moments and those makeup opportunities where you can get double a crowd than you ever would because your stadium has that many seats. Essentially, you're capping yourself by lowering the amount of tickets to make the stadium look a lot more full and to make more premium spaces. You are capping your ultimate attendance by the end of a regular season. Here's another consideration. Do those empty baseball seats, do they actually mean anything? I mean, we're talking about it here. I've gone on for more than a dozen minutes. Is this just situational? Like we can write it off and say, all right, early in the year, bad weather, no big deal. They'll be filled out by June, July, and August. Maybe not in September when the teams are out of it or when it's football season, right? Like it's the beginning and the ends of seasons that you kind of worry about here, especially for the bad teams. Is it just situational? Can we write it off and say, no big deal? Is this also, in the case of Pittsburgh and Miami, like I mentioned, fans sending a message and the same thing and reason why Oakland attendance was so bad last year? The team, shortly after opening day, said they're leaving Oakland. What do you think attendance was going to be like in 2024 at the Coliseum? Does it mean anything in terms of revenue indications for the team? Like, how are the Pirates doing financially right now? How are the Marlins doing financially right now? Small gates, when I say gates, like ticket sales, no concession, parking, everything, merchandise, all that goes down when there's fewer butts in the seats. Another consideration, limiting supply and having equal demand are bound to impact ticket prices. What I mean by that is if you cut down on the volume of seats, you cut down on stadium capacity, but if the demand stays the same, right? Like let's take Dodger Stadium. What if there were only 25,000 seats? Now they're having no problem selling out 50,000 plus. What do you think the ticket prices, which have already shot up this year, what do you think ticket prices at Chavez Ravine are going to be like if there were only 25,000 seats available at Dodger Stadium? They will double or even triple. And that's an extreme case, but you can multiply that across the country, or you can correlate that across the country, that if teams were to cut down on their stadium sizes over the years, like over the next decade or so, The ticket prices are going up no matter what, but they will especially increase with limited supply and even equal demand. I'm not even saying greater demand, just equal demand. Another consideration here is that teams generally are already trending towards smaller capacities in the new stadium designs that have come out to include less seats, fewer seats, and more premium spaces. It's not about how many people you can actually put in a stadium anymore. It's how many amenities can you have that are attractive and that also provide the most revenue, the most kickback. Now, in this case, we're saying, but nobody's showing up anyway. But I'm saying that teams are already kind of focused on fewer seats so that they can use those spaces for more compelling and lucrative options. And so my answer in all of this, I've gone on way too long. Let's get to an answer. The question was, is it worth it for baseball teams to consider smaller stadiums? Number one, it's not an encouraging look to have it the way we've seen it lately. It's not encouraging to have few fans at all these empty stadiums. That's a bad look. Shortening attendance may not be the worst thing in the world, but demand should probably be addressed before supply is altered. That is my biggest answer of all of this. Before we talk about supply, how many seats do we have, capacity, do we need smaller stadiums? Demand, why are so few people showing up? Do ticket prices need to be something that fans can't resist? Do we lower the ticket prices? Do we make it more fan-friendly? What do we do so that the demand can go up? Before you talk about lowering the supply, the demand is really what's in question here, not necessarily the supply. So I'm kind of answering the question in a way that maybe you didn't think before. I don't know if baseball should consider smaller stadiums. They probably are anyway, but demand is their number one, should be their number one priority and not necessarily supply. All right, that's the end of this video. Let me know what you think about it down below. Also, thumbs up while you're down there. That greatly helps me in this video, in this channel. And do me one more quick favor. Make sure you're already subscribing to this channel. That way I can see you definitely back here next time.